In this video, we begin our discussion on Chapter 2, in which we go over demand, whereas in our last chapter we began developing our economic fundamentals by examining the scarcity axiom and some of its consequences in the form of scarcity, the agent problem, and opportunity costs. In this chapter, we seek to continue developing our fundamentals by going through price and quantity determination for a single good or service in a market, in which we'll do so by considering demand as well as supply, then putting the two together in order to examine a market, where in terms of today's lecture on demand for a single good or service, we will go over this by considering our consumers, to then develop demand, and then conclude by distinguishing between a change in quantity demanded from a change in demand. With all this in mind, let us begin. So, we saw in our overview of economics that consumers and firms make choices with their resources to fulfill wants, where when these agents are brought together via institutions, we will have a market, where in these markets are where price and quantity will be determined through the market mechanism, in which price is used as a signaling device to determine the price at which these agents will purchase and sell goods and services. Now what we would like to do is to see how this process occurs. In that understanding price and quantity determination at the micro level, that is for a single good or service, will be useful to reference from when we seek to understand price and quantity determination at the macro level, that is, all goods and services in an economy. With this in mind, to understand the price and quantity determination process, the way that we'll proceed is through example, where the example that we'll consider will be a local town's pizza market that is comprised of consumers as well as pizzerias, where our task then is to explain the amount of pizza slices that are being sold in this market as well as the corresponding price point for the pizza slices. With this in mind, the agent that we'll begin with will be consumers, where we have seen that consumers use their resources of time and income on their wants of leisure and consumption. Furthermore, since we're interested in a pizza market, to simplify our analysis, this means we only need to be interested in terms of how the consumer uses their income on their want of consumption. This then leaves us that consumers will be the buyer in our market, given that the consumer will use their income to fulfill their want of consuming pizza slices. So now that we know that we're interested in consumers and that they will be the buyer in this pizza market, we now would like to explain their behavior. And the way that we'll do this is by considering the setup of, suppose that we have a hungry consumer going to a local pizzeria with some income. The question we then have is, how did they decide on how many slices of pizza to purchase? Well, the answer to this question will be based upon their willingness and ability to purchase pizza slices. Ability in that the pizzeria charges a particular price point for each pizza slice. And we know that this consumer has gone to the pizzeria with only so much income. So there's a limit on how many pizza slices they can purchase. Furthermore, we know that this consumer is hungry and they place a level of value on these pizza slices. And so, since this consumer is using their resource of income to fulfill their want of consuming pizza slices, they want to make themselves the best off possible. And in order to do so, they would only be able to purchase pizza slices given that the value that they place on the pizza slices is greater than or equal to the price point of the pizza slice. If this was not the case, if the value was less than its price, then this would make them worse off, and this would go against making themselves the best off possible. So what we have then is that the consumer makes their decision based upon the quantity that they can afford and comparing the value of the good or service, in this case pizza, compared to its price point, where they will go through with purchases so long as the value is greater than or equal to the corresponding price point. So when this consumer then is willing and able to buy pizza, we say that the consumer will demand pizza. Or in general then, to define demand, what this means is the willingness and ability to buy specific quantities of a good at alternative prices in a given time period, ceteris paribus, where ceteris paribus means holding all other factors equal. So now that we know what demand is and that it's based upon willingness and ability, we can further decompose this into the determinants of demand based upon willingness and ability. And this will comprise 6 factors, where these 6 factors will be preferences, in which they will be positively related to demand, in which, as mentioned, the consumer places a certain level of value on these pizza slices, where this value can be based upon the taste of the pizza slices or how full each slice leaves them, where should the taste or the amount of full they are after eating one slice of pizza changes, then we would expect a change in the quantity of pizzas they would purchase. In that if taste increases, this would mean an increase in preferences. If they enjoy eating this pizza more, we would expect them to purchase more pizza as a result. A second factor would be income. This is the scarce resource to the consumer, where with more of their scarce resource, this would expand their available choices. With more available choices, we would expect them to purchase more pizza slices. So we would expect a positive relationship between the scarce resource and demand. Third, we have substitute good prices. Substitute goods are goods that fulfill the same role as one another, where in this case, our consumer is going to a local pizzeria to enjoy a meal given that they are hungry. So here, pizza is serving as a meal, where a substitute good would be an alternative food item that also serves as a meal. Where at this pizzeria, suppose that they also serve calzones. Calzones will also have a corresponding price point. So when the consumer is deciding on their pizza slices that they would like to purchase, well, they would also look at the price of alternatives. If calzones are more expensive than pizza slices, that could influence the decision on how many pizza slices this consumer is purchasing, and vice versa. Where if pizza slices were cheaper than calzones, this would probably provide incentive for consumers to purchase more pizza slices than calzones, given that they're cheaper. So we'd expect that substitute good prices be positively related with the demand for the good and service in question, in that if calzone prices increase, pizza slices are cheaper, so the consumer has more incentive to purchase pizza slices. Moving on, a fourth factor would be complementary good prices, where complementary goods are goods frequently consumed in unison with one another. Where in our case of a meal, when someone goes to a restaurant, it's fairly common for somebody to order a food item as well as a drink. Where in this case, we can think about it in terms of consuming pizza slices with cups of soda, where we would expect an inverse relationship with complementary good prices, in that if this consumer is consuming pizza slices and cups of soda, if cups of soda, in terms of its price point, increases, holding everything else equal, this means the amount of pizza slices the consumer can purchase will decrease, so we expect them to be willing and able to purchase less pizza slices as a result. A fifth factor will be expectations, in that what the consumer perceives to be true in the future can affect their decisions today, where, in terms of price expectations, if for whatever reason the consumer expects in the future that the pizzeria will increase their price for pizza, then today, to take advantage of those cheaper prices, they may purchase more pizza slices today to take advantage of that cheaper price. So there would be a positive relationship between price expectations and demand. Alternatively, expectations can play a role in terms of income, in that if the consumer expects a raise at their job, such that they'll have an increase in their income in the future, then given that in the future they expect more income, they may use more of it today and purchase more pizza slices as a result as well. And lastly, this doesn't deal with a particular individual consumer, but the sum of consumers, in that at this pizzeria, a certain amount of consumers frequent the place and purchase pizza slices, where if the amount of consumers increases, then the amount of people willing and able to purchase pizza slices will likely increase as well, in which we expect a positive relationship between the two. So with these factors out of the way, what we have then is we've defined demand and we've gone over the factors that comprise the willingness and ability for this consumer to purchase pizza slices. Now we would like to examine its property. Well, a key property of demand, and for our pizza slice demand example, is that there will be an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. And we can express this through the law of demand, which states that the quantity of the good demanded in a given time period increases as its price decreases, given no other changes. And we can explain this through that value example that we gave when we were explaining willingness and ability, in that as the consumer goes to the pizzeria and they are hungry and they are considering that first slice of pizza, since they are hungry, they will place a high value on that pizza slice. Afterwards, if they were to consider a second slice of pizza, it would leave them closer to being full, but since they've already eaten, it's not as useful to them. So the value that they would place on the second slice of pizza would not be as high as the first slice, in that it's useful, but not as useful as the first one. And if this consumer were to consider a third slice of pizza, if the second slice left them full, then this third one would merely be leftovers to have at home for another time. This provides value to them, but definitely isn't as useful to them as that second slice or that first slice. So that value that they place would be lower than the second slice and most definitely lower than that first slice. So that what we have then is that the value that they place on pizza is decreasing the more of it that they have. So this gives that inverse relationship between price and quantity, which we can express through the demand curve and demand schedule that we see below. Where in terms of the demand curve, on the left, we have price on the vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis, and we have our pizza slice demand curve in blue, going from points A through G, in which we see we have a downward sloping curve, and that starting at a price point of 7 and quantity demanded of 1 pizza slice, we see that as pizza price decreases, we have downward movement along our demand curve, in which we see pizza slice quantity demanded increases, in which we can also see on our demand schedule. We're starting at point A. As pizza price decreases, then pizza slices demanded will increase. So what we have then in our prior slide is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. But in terms of the demand curve, at a particular price point will be on a specific point along the demand curve. If price were to change, then we would have movement along the demand curve, which we would define as a change in quantity demanded, given that the consumer is responding to a price change, that is, the market mechanism acting in place. Where to consider this, let us consider our demand curve below and our demand schedule. Where starting at point A, if this consumer initially went to the pizzeria and the price was $7, they would be willing and able to purchase 1 slice. Where if they went the following week and there was no other change except for the pizzeria changing the price of pizza from $7 to $4, well, as this consumer is evaluating how many slices to purchase, well, the value that they would place is that they would be willing and able to only purchase 4 slices, such that we would expect downward movement along our demand curve given the law of demand, and so we have movement along from point A to point B, where with the price decrease from $7 to $4, this consumer is willing and able to purchase 4 slices of pizza. Where if we were to continue this in the following week, in which the pizzeria continued to lower its price, we would see that the consumer would continue its response in increasing its quantity demanded, giving us movement from point B to point C. Now, how this contrasts from change in demand, this is going to be one of those 6 factors changing, where instead of we have movement along the demand curve, we have an entire shift of the demand curve. We're using income as an example. If we have our initial demand curve in blue, and this consumer has an increase in income, then at all price points, they'd be willing and able to purchase more pizza slices, so right where it shifted the demand curve, and then this would leave them at point B, where they would now be willing and able to purchase 6 slices of pizza. Or alternatively, you could consider the opposite case, in which if this consumer has a decrease in their income, then the entire demand curve would shift to the left. Holding price equal, they'd be willing and able to purchase less pizza slices, in this case 2, at the same price point. So with this in mind, where we'll pick up in our next video is by going over supply.